We've reached peak geometry. Modern mountain bikes are now perfectly shaped for their job. Or are they? I'm Will from MBUK and we're going to be looking at the evolution of mountain bike geometry with some key examples you might expect and some you probably won't. Geometry defines the way your bike rides, but unlike bling suspension or multi-compound tyres, geometry is free. Manufacturers make a mould or jig the shape they want and weld up the tubes. So after 50 years of mountain biking, have manufacturers finally got it right? Mountain biking began in the 1970s when Californian dudes created clunkers with rigid steel frames. To maximise stability, they had slack head angles to rake out the forks, low bottom bracket heights and long wheelbases. Their geometry was inspired by beach cruisers and the motocross bikes of the day. Then in the 1980s, mountain bikes hit the mainstream and there was a regression in geometry, with mountain bikes beginning to look more like their road-going counterparts. Stems grew longer, wheelbases shrank, and head angles began to steepen. Thankfully, those days are well and truly over. Since the 2010s, geometry has gradually become more extreme and the mantra longer, lower, slacker is often spouted whenever the latest incarnation of a product line is unveiled. But these shouts have recently become more of a whisper. We've gone too far, but now are we coming back? Geometry? Completed it, mate. In the last 10 years, many things have accelerated the development of progressive geometry. Industry outliers like Chris Porter and his Geometron project, the rise in the popularity of mountain biking at the gnarlier end of the spectrum, and bike parks allowing riders access to extreme trails. Longer, lower, slacker was a marketing shorthand for the modernisation of mountain bike geometry. As cockpit length or reach became longer, bottom bracket heights became lower and head angles became slacker. Is this still occurring or has it reached a comfortable plateau? Different genres of bike have morphed and evolved over the years, but now some seem to have reached an accepted stasis where any longer, lower or slacker would just be, well, too long, low and slack. Let's start by looking at downhill bikes. Downhill bikes have to tackle the world's gnarliest off-road terrain at maximum speed. They are focused descending machines. So surely this is where the gnarliest no-compromise geometry can be found. Or is it? Downhill bike geometry has barely changed in the last 5 years. Wheels have just got bigger and bigger as the once progressive 27.5-inch wheel size became outdated and has paved the way to full 29ers and mullet setups with a 29-inch wheel on the front and a 27.5-inch wheel relegated to the rear only. Let's look at two highly successful downhill bikes of the last 5 years, the Specialized Demo and the Canyon Sender. Let's look at the Sender first. It's a great looking downhill bike and is often seen in uplift queues across the globe. The head angle of the bike has been fixed at 63 degrees since 2018. That's 5 years ago. The head tube gained angle adjustment in 2019 and 2020, but 63 degrees remained the middle setting. Angle adjustability was then removed in 2021 in favour of reach adjustment, and this is how it remains today. So score 1 for reaching peak geometry. Canyon clearly think that 63 degrees is where it's at. But what about length? Well, reach grew from 460mm for a large size Sender to 485mm in 2021, but hasn't changed since. Bottom bracket height has only changed 1mm over the last 5 years, even if you're comparing the original 27.5-inch Sender to the full 29er bike now. So the bike has grown an inch longer, but it isn't any lower or slacker than it was 5 years ago. Let's take a look at the Demo. It has specialised FSR suspension and is regarded as a great handling downhill bike. Let's deal with angles first. The head angle was 63.5 degrees in 2018, but then slackened to 62.7 degrees in 2019. It steepened slightly in 2022 by just 0.1 of a degree, but for 2023 the new Demo is steeper again. Nearly half a degree steeper at 63.2 in the middle setting when set up as a 29er. We see the same story for reach, a medium Demo growing just 4mm over the past half decade. Bottom bracket height, we've seen a regression, steering directly away from being any lower. The latest Demo in the middle bottom bracket setting sits a whopping 13mm higher than the 2018 bike. Whilst this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it shows that the Demos certainly aren't getting longer, lower and slacker. Fabien Barel famously experimented with a wild 59-degree head angle on his Mondraker Summum back in 2010. It looks like downhill bikes, even under pro riders, have found a happy medium and a geometry that just works. Head to the hotly contested market of enduro and trail bikes, and geometry progression gets even more extreme. But is it now coming back to centre? Enduro bikes are the world rally cars of mountain biking, able to go long distances on extreme terrain and stand up to serious abuse, but still able to be comfortably pedalled on the transition stages without sapping too much energy. Most are 29ers, but many run mullet setups, and travel goes from 160mm, with some enduro bikes offering up to 190mm of travel. There is a grey area where the definition of enduro and trail bikes blur, but most accept that trail bikes are 130 to 140mm travel and enduro bikes are 150mm plus. Enduro bikes tend to be heavier, stronger and more aggressive in the geometry stakes than trail bikes. Bikes like Sick Bicycle's wild titanium and steel creations and Alutech's truly out there Armageddon with that chopper-like head angle and generous to absurd reach numbers show just how far geometry can be taken. Most normal people would glance at these bikes and think they just look broken. The Alutech Armageddon, for example, features a 57-degree head angle and an 80-degree seat tube angle. But these bikes and their numbers are curiosities, showing just how far the envelope can be pushed, and credit to them. However, numbers like these don't necessarily offer an advantage or a solution to a specific problem for the average mountain biker. There isn't a conspiracy on hand. Bike manufacturers all want to create the best bike for their customers and team riders. So what do the numbers of enduro bikes from mainstream manufacturers tell us? Let's look at two stalwarts of the enduro scene, the Trek Slash and the Giant Rain. The Trek Slash has shown a steady evolution over the past 5 years, with head angles rapidly slackening and bottom bracket heights dropping. Reaches have grown too. Longer, lower, slacker then. Well, are we seeing a plateau coming? Trek's amazing new Mark 6 Slash with its high pivot wizardry actually comes in 8mm higher in the BB height than the previous iteration of the bike when run with 29-inch wheels, or 6mm higher as it's sold in the mullet configuration. The reach has grown since the Mark 5, but only by 4mm as a 29er or 2mm as a mullet. But the head angle is over half a degree slacker than the old model, now coming in at just 63.5 degrees for the 29er or 63.3 for the mullet. The rate of change in geometry is slowing or even reversing then in terms of reach and bottom bracket height, but that head angle change is certainly noticeable. Will the Mark 7 Slash go even slacker? I'm not so sure. What about Giant? Their Rain is a staple of the enduro scene. Let's look at its evolution. Again, taking readings from the mid setting in Giant's adjustable geometry, we can see that the latest version of the Rain in the large size actually has an 8mm shorter reach than the previous generation, backing up the idea that geometry peaked. However, the head angle is a different story, with the latest Rain 3/4 of a degree slacker than the previous one. It's still evolving. There's a similar story with the bottom bracket height, as the latest Rain sets your cranks 8mm lower than the 2022 bike, which is a pronounced difference. So, there is evidence here to suggest that the reach numbers aren't going to keep growing, and it could be argued that bottom brackets can't get much lower without leading to frustrating pedal strikes. What about head angles? Well, with downhill bikes at 63 degrees and modern enduro bikes are only slightly steeper than that, could it be that there isn't much more scope to slacken? Perhaps it could be argued that we really have reached peak geometry for enduro bikes. They're the best they've ever been, and can they get even better? Let us know in the comments. What about trail bike geometry? Trail bikes fill the niche between downcountry bikes and enduro bikes, with 29-inch wheels, lightweight full suspension frames, and around 130 to 140mm of travel. Trail bikes are the jack of all trades, which make up most people's idea of what a generic mountain bike is. They're happiest at the trail centre, but can still be fun riding off-piste tracks or even playing at the bike park. It's these bikes that have arguably evolved the most over the past decade, but will that trend carry on? Let's have a look at the Specialized Stump Jumper Evo and the Mondraker Foxy. The Specialized Stump Jumper Evo of 2018 was remarkable. Those in the know were gagging to get hold of one. It was one of the most extreme trail bikes we had ever seen. So how has the faithful Stumpy Evo evolved over the past 5 years? Has it got more extreme? Well, no. In actual fact, the Stump Jumper Evo is steeper, even in the slack setting, and has a higher bottom bracket, even in the low setting, than the 2018 bike. So what does this tell us? Well, adjustable bikes are great. The ability to adjust your geometry to suit your preferences is awesome. So kudos to Specialized and any brand which allows that opportunity to riders. Well, what about those base settings? Well, if you put the Stumpy Evo in the middle of its adjustment, you will see that the head angle went from 63.5 degrees to peak at 64.5 degrees in 2021, but back to 64 degrees in 2023. Not massive changes, and that just shows how forward-thinking the 2018 bike really was. But we've gone slightly steeper. Likewise with the bottom bracket height, the 321mm BB height of the 2018 bike was well low. And even in the lowest setting, the bike is slightly higher than that now. This tells us that visionary Specialized, with their pro riders and R&D department, really looked into their crystal ball in 2018 to predict the trail bike geometry of the future, and they nailed it. But the current model is slightly higher and steeper than the bike of 5 years ago. What about another cutting edge brand, Mondraker? They stunned the mountain bike world in 2014 with their forward geometry, combining short stems with long reach, slack head angles and a low bottom bracket height. In the decades since, have their bikes got even more radical? Well, no. The 2023 Mondraker Foxy Carbon has a 16mm shorter reach, 10mm higher bottom bracket and only half a degree slacker head angle than the bike from a decade ago. What happened? Well, Mondraker just nailed it with the Foxy in 2014. Going any longer or lower or slacker wouldn't actually have improved the ride. Mondraker are fanatical about R&D, and when we visited their HQ, there was no shortage of test mules. So, we've reached peak geometry. Manufacturers went too far and came back to reach the sweet spot we have now. No more longer, lower, slacker. So what does this mean for you? The mountain biker, the consumer, the one swinging your leg over a steed during your leisure time and wanting the best performance. Well, now you can buy a new bike, safe in the knowledge that the geometry is still going to work well in 5 years' time. And thanks to frame manufacturers including flip chips galore, if you have any specific geometry preferences or just enjoy experimenting with different angles and lengths, you can play to your heart's content. So what has all this painstaking research shown us? Well, you shouldn't expect the 2030 mountain bike you buy to have a 57-degree head angle, and mountain bikes really are the best they've ever been. Perhaps the bike you've bought now will still be current in 5 years' time. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and subscribe to BikeRadar for more great tech videos. /sender